Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. If you've never been an Audible customer and want to see what they offer, just go to www.audibletrial.com/Excelsior Journeys and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title for free and start listening. It's that easy. Why Audible? Audible content includes an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more from the leading audiobook publishers, broadcasters, and entertainers. And with this free 30-day trial, you'll have your pick of it all. You can hear books of all genres narrated by Jim Dale, Stephen Fry, Will Patton, Alex Hyde White, Jeff Brick, Neil Shaw, William Demerit, and even a few by me, George Sirois. So go to www.audibletrial.com/Excelsior Journeys and start your own 30-day journey with Audible today.
Is there a burning desire within to share your creativity with the rest of the world? Do you insist on pursuing your passion by any means necessary? Then you are on an Excelsior journey, and you are not alone. Welcome back to Excelsior Journeys. My name is George Sirois. Thank you so much for being here as part of a little filmmaker miniseries that I'm doing right now as we kind of build up to the Oscars. As you know, this is February 5th, and there was going to be my another guest that was slotted in, painter Elizabeth Meggs. That is actually going to take place next week. So we're doing like a little preemptive kind of, filling in, but it just so happens that my guest today is part of the filmmakers miniseries. So it works out really well. Before I started podcasting, in fact, quite a few years before I started podcasting, I was always a writer in some shape or form. When I was in high school, I would fill my steno notebooks with stories that have actually wound up sticking around to the point where they are now in book form. You can get both Excelsior and its sequel, Ever Upward, at bookstores on Amazon. You can and Part 3, Greater Glory, is currently in production. So there's a lot going on there. But one thing that I really owe a debt of gratitude toward, in terms of getting me really comfortable with my writing, is the time that I wrote for a pop culture website called 411mania.com. And I did a weekly column there called Scene Anatomy 101, where I would take a specific scene from a different movie each week, and I would dissect that particular scene and show why it's significant to the rest of the film. And it was so much fun to do. I wound up doing about 200 of those before I finally stepped away from it. And the column went over well enough that the webmaster, Ashish Pabari, asked me to do a weekly movies and TV zone article that would take place every Thursday. So he wound up really keeping me busy, and I always appreciate that. And I really appreciate the readers that would take the time to reach out to me. And one in particular that I've become friends with almost immediately happened as a result of me putting out a column on the film Dogma by Kevin Smith. Now, as you see, considering that I'm podcasting, Kevin Smith continues to play a big part in my life. Hi, Kevin, if you're listening. And this particular scene was the garage scene that took place very late in the film between Matt Damon as Loki and Ben Affleck as Bartleby. And it was a really great, meaty scene that was, very well. It was I would say it was one of Ben Affleck's best performances, and I would say it was right up there with Matt Damon's. It was really great to see the two of them really, working well together with just the two of them in that particular scene. And it turns out that a reader reached out to me to let me know of his affection, not only for that scene, but also for the movie in general. And that was a gentleman from Canada that we're speaking with today. His name is Luke Annand. Luke has gone on to start up his own podcast called Ramblings of a Guy from Regina. which you can find on SoundCloud and I believe on iTunes as well. We'll go ahead and correct that once he joins us. And he has also been a very voracious writer himself, to the point where he is very much a student of film. He has been a production assistant for various projects up in Canada. He has also gone on to get into screenwriting, and he has some really fun stories to share with us for his screenwriting venture. And so this is going to be a lot of fun because Luke really personifies the Excelsior journey, because he is constantly evolving as he goes on through life. So it's going to be great to hear him. And without further ado, please meet my guest, Luke Annand. Luke, how are you today?
I'm doing great, and just to just to correct you there, right now the podcast is only available on iTunes. I know there's a bunch of different other platforms that I can put the podcast on, but I've never really looked. I haven't looked into different platforms just yet, because for me, my podcasting is more just like a hobby. Like, it's something that I do just sharpen my writing and my editing skills, and also to keep in contact with people that I've met at different places and times of my life, and to try to keep those relationships going. And actually, I'm a little bit inspired by you, because right now I'm editing my 2-part best of episode that I do every year, where I do my 10 best list for like my picks for like the best movies of the year. And then me and 2 other guys that I know, we each write our own 3 individual best TV lists, and then we assign like a points value system to them, so that we have a combined 10 best TV list, which can be really interesting at times. And now I'm actually, speaking of like the stuff that I work on, I want to do a little mini series of podcast episodes of like kind of taking inspiration from you, in that I want to interview people that I work with on the different projects here in Winnipeg. And I already have my locations department episode, and now I'm just sort of trying to get people together, like a mini series of episodes where each episode is interviews people from a different department, where you have a hair and makeup department, and a grip electrics locations department, and a AED department, and just trying to see where that goes, because we have this really rare window of opportunity where right now nothing's going on, but by March it's just going to be like super busy again, and we can sort of touch on that later.
Excellent. That sounds terrific. So I'm really looking forward to hearing that, and I hope that all of my listeners are as well. And if you're not familiar with Canada, Regina is spelled like Regina, Regina. So by all means, take a listen. You'll actually hear me in several episodes. The two of us we spoke at great lengths about Star Trek: The Next Generation, about film music, about the Nightmare on Elm Street series, about other horror series. There's a whole lot that we've discussed in and quite lengthy discussions, I must say as well. So we'll start off just as I always do here. What was the lightning bolt moment that made you decide that you wanted film to be as big a part of your life as it is? Was it something that you knew you always were going to work in? Was it something that you were going to make a career out of? What was that moment for you? Was there a particular movie that really kind of started you on the path, or was it just film in general?
Well, film in general, definitely. Like, I can't remember a time that I was never into movies, and it's kind of runs in my family because, my mom loves movies and my grandma loves movies as well. So I kind of feel that it's, just part of the family. But if I could narrow it down to like one particular, not even just a movie, but a sequence, it's the train sequence at the end of Back to the Future Part 3. I had that on, my folks recorded it off of the TV, and actually the tape that it's on had another Robert Zemeckis movie, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is a classic in and of itself. And
absolutely,
there's a part of me that wants to me having kids is like a 0.01% chance. But in case if that does happen, the moment I'm looking forward to the most is, you know how like some people like parents like they record they film their kids watching Empire Strikes Back for the first time, and it's the whole Luke, I am your father. I want to do that with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, with the big reveal of like, you know, Judge Doom like turning around and it's like the big red eyes, and it's the remember me, Eddie, when I killed your brother, I talked just like this. Like, it is a collective moment that we all shit our pants.
Oh, it's great! That was so much fun.
And I'd like to refer to Who Framed Roger Rabbit as baby's first noir.
Yeah.
Basically,
it really is.
If you want to get your kids into film noir without having to show them like Chinatown or LA Confidential or any of the stuff that's like too risque, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is like the perfect movie to show them. But getting back to the Future Part 3, the same tape that had Who Framed Roger Rabbit recorded off of it, it also had the train sequence from Back to the Future Part 3. Like, and I would watch that sequence over and over and over again, because that to me is like, that sequence is more sword fight, car chase, run on the Death Star, any action sequence that you can think of. Back to the Future 3, in my mind, the train sequence tops that. And it's like, I saw that when I was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 or something like that. And it was like, okay, now I know what I do in my life. I want to make movies. I want to give somebody else the exact same thrill I got watching that.
It really is just a tremendous sequence. And, you know, I'm, you know, always very, very fond of that film. And I'm really fond of the entire trilogy. I was really taken by all the different twists and turns that it took. And to put the bulk of your film in the Old West and make that as the climax of this entire trilogy, it took some guts. It took some serious guts on Zemeckis and Gale's part to make that happen. And that whole
and then
the fact that like everything built toward it in such a fluid way was really something. And just like what you were saying, the timing of everything, all the different shots, the suspense, the music. God bless Alan Silvestri. That's one of his finest pieces of music right there. And just the way that it had that crescendo right.
And then not only just the sequence itself, but then the denouement where the time machine gets destroyed, and then the final sequence is just the final scene of Back to the Future Part 3 is like the perfect way to end a trilogy, where it's just, you know, it really solidifies the bond between Doc and Marty, and, you know, when Jennifer has like, I brought the note back from now it's erased. Of course it's erased. Well, what does that mean? It means your future hasn't been written yet. No one's has. Your future is whatever you make it. So make it a good one. Both of you. And then just that final exchange of, hey, Doc, where are you going now? Back to the future? Nope. Already been there. And then when you see every time I see like the time locomotive like take off, and it's just, I get chills just talking about it.
Yeah.
It leaves it on the absolute perfect note.
That moment, yeah, absolutely. That's a wonderful, like, crystallized moment right there. That whole train sequence, it really is fantastic. So from there, you had that moment. You've been able to hold on to it for all these years. So from high school, did you go into college to study film, or was it something?
Oh, yep, absolutely. University of Regina, to the film program there. And then just to give sort of like the really quick sum up version of like my journey through where I'm at this point, is that went to the U of R to get a degree in film and video production, got that in 2008, and it was like I graduated sort of right when the recession hit. And then a year later, my folks were like, okay, you can still pursue the film. You should go get a diploma in like library information technician, just so you could get a job other than like, you know, working in warehouses. So I went to Toronto for 2 years, and I barely passed, like just by the skin of my teeth did I get that diploma. And I never ended up working in a library, because it's sort of a catch-22 thing of, oh, they can't hire you unless you have experience, and you can't get experience unless somebody hires you. So yeah, so even though the reason I went to Toronto ended up being a complete bust, I'm still glad that I went there, because it led to a bunch, you know, me starting my own podcast. I went to TIFF for 2 years in a row. That's the Toronto International Film Festival. I started writing for this site that was based out of Toronto, and I met a few people that became some of my most frequent guests on the podcast. And most importantly, it actually led to it kind of gave me the kick in the ass that I need to sort of get my own film career going. And so while I was there, I created I wrote the outline for what ultimately became my first film. Like, I can say I'm a maker because I actually made a film, and it's this short film called Rough Sketches. And then really quick, and we can loop back to that really quick. Loop back to that. But after I came back from came back to Regina in 2011, a year later, our tax credit was cut by our provincial government, which basically means that our really successful film industry that we had there was just, our provincial government told $1 billion industry to f*** off.
Mm.
And so because of that, when I was, okay, where can I go to pursue my film career? As much as I love Toronto, that and Toronto and Vancouver are like really super expensive to live in, and there are legions of people ahead of you there. And so really the only option was Winnipeg, which was only a 6-hour drive away. It had its own film industry, plus I had a family there already. And so I moved there April 1st, 2013. So I'm 2 months shy of my 6-month anniversary of living here in Winnipeg. And then I basically had to start at square one again, and just doing daily work of working on different productions here and there, mostly doing parking lockups, which is just me sitting in my car for 8 hours listening to podcasts while waiting for the trucks to show up. And then 2013, I actually lucked out because about 2 months after I moved there, I did 2 weeks on this movie called Heaven is for Real. And then yeah, I have it in my collection, and it's mainly because it's sort of like a memento of like, oh, this was my first film gig. And then I would do a few days here and there. There wasn't anything in 2014, but then 2015 I did 10 days on A Dog's Purpose. And then 2016, that's when like things like really started picking up. And then 2017 was when I finally had enough days to officially become a member of the DGC, the Directors Guild of Canada. That's the guild. I mean, you have different guilds and unions involved in film productions, and the DGC covers the locations. And so after that, the president of the guild there, Kathy Edgar, she was also the locations manager on this new show that was starting up called Burden of Truth. And the first season of Burden of Truth was my first like full-time film gig, where I was in the location department, where basically you have to show up an hour before for everyone's call time, and you're changing the liners in the garbages, you're setting up tents for the and just a bunch, and also during the day you have your lockups, so that you're kind of you're the film for the general public. And most of the time, people just sort of take one look and then they walk away, like they go on sort of like doing what they were doing anyways. But you get the I always notice you get 3 questions. You have what's going on, what's the movie, and it's always a movie, and who's in it. And that's basically, you're kind of, I wouldn't say we're at the bottom of the rung, but we're fairly low within there. And that to me sort of like, I actually enjoy that because it gives you a perspective, you get a perspective on like the whole run of the production. And so you're seeing how like, how a well-oiled machine works, and you take that into, and you sort of, you kind of learn from that, so that in the situation where if you're ever in a situation where you're a producer or director, or you're running a crew or something, okay, what you don't do.
Nice.
Yeah, and so I've done 2 seasons of Burden of Truth so far, and it's and also this movie that's coming out in April called Breakthrough.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you've gotten so much valuable experience just by being in that, at the right place at the right time, and being able to take advantage of that. That's terrific. So
yeah, let it never be said that patience and bullheaded determinism never paid off.
You definitely speak the truth about that. That's something that I hope a lot of our listeners really kind of take to heart. So just remember, patience is definitely a virtue. It's not just a cliched saying there. It's cliched saying because it's true. And so you just gotta remember that. You just have to keep on pushing forward. Obviously if it's what you want to do and you feel like you're in the right direction to do it, then by all means you got to stick with it, because it will pay out for you in the end. So since then, since you've been doing all of that, you've been doing all the PA work. When did you decide that the time was right to start your screenplay ventures?
Okay, well, first off, back in 2009 when I was in Toronto, and like I said, it sort of gave me that kick in the ass that I needed to to make my first like short film. Basically, sort of like streams of inspiration. Like I find that when it comes to like my stories, there's like a fictional film component to it, and then there's also a personal component to it. And with my first short film, Rough Sketches, the personal aspect, the personal component of that was my cousin Landon. He around the same time that same time, he unfortunately passed away. He had two different kinds of cancer going on at the same time. Like he's like one of 14 people in medical history that happened, and like his name is a medical textbook somewhere. And it was just seeing my Aunt Jill just going through this really public form of grieving and just feeling just completely helpless of when like a family member dies, and seeing that very public form of grieving, and that helplessness of wanting to help but having no idea how to do that. And then the film aspect of it is there were three inspirations for Rough Sketches. There was the classic Twilight Zone, No Country for Old Men, and oddly enough, The Little Mermaid.
Huh.
So let me back up. So in terms of Twilight Zone,
that inspiration finds how that inspiration just kind of pops up at the most random places.
Right. So with Twilight Zone, it was basically storytelling structure where, you watch the classic Twilight Zone and, in 22 minutes, they're able to pack in so much plot, character, and theme all within like a really great economic short amount of time. With No Country for Old Men, it was basically, as a writer, you get, you sort of get into your head a little bit, and you're trying to create all the this witty dialogue and great repartee and awesome monologues that your actors are gonna chew in. And then you see something like No Country for Old Men, which is almost like the most stripped down action thriller you could possibly imagine, where it's there's no music, very little dialogue, and it is one of the most tense storytelling, tense experiences you will ever have in a movie theater, watching a movie. And so when you see that, and it's oh yes, oh yeah, right. Film is a visual medium. You tell your story visually. And so that's something that I definitely keep in mind, where, my scripts have tons of dialogue in there, but during the really important scenes, everyone shuts the fuck up. And then the third inspiration for that was Little Mermaid, which that's another reason that I'm so glad that I was in Toronto for those 2 years. Was my first Toronto National Film Festival. I saw this documentary called Waking Sleeping Beauty, which is
terrific documentary.
Yeah, it's an amazing documentary about the period at Disney between 84 and 94, where they went from dead last and on the brink of irrelevance to the powerhouse that it is today. And seeing that movie, it actually made me want to rewatch The Little Mermaid, which is a movie I had hated ever since I was 4. And so I rewatched the movie, and given the time and place where I am in my life, and I watched the movie, and I'm like, oh, me, I do want to be part of that world. And then listening to the commentary track on it, they talked about how when they were, every Disney movie, they always get tons of letters from, fans saying how much the movie how much they appreciate it. And with Little Mermaid, they noticed that they got a lot of letters about from letters about fathers and daughters, and there was one letter in particular which was from this New Jersey state trooper who he and his daughter had like a massive falling out and hadn't spoken to each other in 20 years. And so he goes to see the movie, which is a miracle in and of itself that a state trooper from New Jersey is seeing a
Right.
Disney movie, and the movie resonates, and the movie connected with him so much that he like extended an olive branch to his daughter, and now he and his daughter have a great relationship. Which that story in and of itself, like people ask, oh, why do artists do what you? Why do you want to be a filmmaker? Why do you want to devote yourself to this? And it's those stories like that
Yeah.
your work can impact somebody on such a personal level that it's like, yeah, you can never win an award or go broke or something like that. If you like directly impacts that person, then the whole thing's worth it.
Yeah.
And but then I hear but then you hear that story, and I thought, well, what if that didn't happen? What if by the time he made that connection and that spark of inspiration, how would he deal with that? And so I took those two threads and I put them together, and I made this short film about this guy named Dave, who his daughter dies, and he was a guy who barely says two words even under the. And so he's completely retreated into himself in the death of with the death of his daughter, and he starts watching this cartoon that that was in her DVD in the DVD player in her DVD player on the tiny TV in her room, and then he starts his obsession grows in that he tries to start writing he starts drawing, trying to draw the character, but he thinks he's failing at every turn. It's like somebody who barely. It's like somebody. It's like somebody who's never picked up a paintbrush before trying to recreate the Sistine Chapel, that sort of thing. And then and then afterwards he's like dejected and he throws the drawings away. But then his nephew, who's an animator, who has that connection with connection. That's the thing that the nephew and the daughter sort of connected with. He discovers the drawings and he knows what he's trying to do, and so he tries to teach his uncle how to draw. And it's on YouTube, so you can actually watch it for yourself. It's like I said, it's called Rough Sketches. And I imagine if I were to look at it right now, I'd probably see all like these massive glaring faults with it and be like, oh God, this is awful. But I know that at the time it worked. It worked. Like I said, I'm glad I did it, just to, at the very least, just to prove to myself that I can do this, that I can actually, not only can I put through, I can actually, that the whole endeavor is worth it, and that I can create something that's actually good. And I know it's good because when I screened it at the film pool in Regina, it was me and like 4 other shorts that were screening there, and mine was in the middle, and was the middle film. 5 shorts that were screened there. Mine was the only one that got any actual applause.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's how I knew that. Okay, this was actually good. Whereas like, okay, I can do this. So
yeah, it's great to get that kind of validation for your work, and just to know, because I mean everyone always wants that kind of approval, obviously, but when you get that moment, when you feel like you know that that was the best that you could do at that time, and then you get that sort of approval and everything, basically just saying, yes, you are on the right track, keep going, this is what you should be doing. That's a sort of great kind of feeling that we all yearn for. So that's awesome that you were able to get that.
Mm-hmm.
So from Rough Sketches, what happens after that? How were you able to take that moment, that feeling of, yes, I'm on the right track, and then move that to the next level? What was that for you?
Well, like I said, after I made the short film, I then to basically just sort of start over again, and then with this current thing that I'm working on right now, it's this script that's called it was for the longest time called The Gauntlet, which was a title recommendation made by you, actually. But most recently, I've been calling it The Legend of Nikki Olives, which was also your recommendation as well. So if we have to retitle the movie again, I'll just send you an email.
Yep, bring it on. Yeah. I mean, granted, the title right in between there was The Ballad of Nikki Olives, and when it was once we were talking a little bit more about one specific line that you had there.
Yeah, you can actually hear us
brainstorming
that in the Nightmare on Elm Street episode that we did on my podcast.
Yeah, and yeah, you'll actually get to hear that moment for yourself when that suggestion was made and how and how you're able to take it. So, a little piece of film history right there in that particular episode. And we also had a lot of fun picking apart the Elm Street series. So, yeah, you get all of it in one shot. So, by all means, check that one out.
Okay, and also, and I don't know if this will stay in or not, but of like where the title comes from. I rewrote that instead of the final line of the scene where like the title comes from. I rewrote it as my story wasn't a tragedy; it was a legend.
Mm-hmm.
I felt good about myself after that. Yeah, it's just looking back on that, I'm like, Tale of Woe was a little, it was a little clunky there. And I know I'm not using the term tragedy properly. Like, that was one of the things I remember from my English class is that, people throw the term tragedy around all the time of like a train derailed and 50 people died. What a tragic event. And it's like, well, it's a horrible event, but it's not technically a tragedy. Like, the easiest way to sort of sum it up is that, melodrama is something bad happens to a main character from an outside force. Tragedy is something bad happens to a character, and it's the character's fault that it happens.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted. So I know I'm not using the term tragedy properly. It's kind of like that whole literally thing where, like, the term literally doesn't mean what people don't use the term literally the way that it's actually supposed to be meant. So that sort of gave me a license, and just, my story wasn't a tragedy. It was a legend. That just sounds so much better.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. So I'm thrilled with the kind of progress you've made with that. You've been speaking with a screenwriting doctor as well, correct?
Yeah, it's there was this guy Jeff Iami. He's a story editor here in Winnipeg, and I actually did meet with him recently, like a few days ago. And with this latest draft that I have, it's like the sixth it's the sixth draft of the script, The Legend of Nikki Olives, and he says that I am about 75% there.
Awesome.
And that I just need to do like one more polish on it of just less dialogue in there, and I figured I could probably go and like I'm giving myself sort of like the challenge of, okay, let's try to eliminate like one sentence in any of if like the character is like going on and on, that eliminate a sentence or two here, to try to get to the point. And then also it's just the big thing is just bringing the subtext of Nikki's character up to the forefront, so that instead of me having to explain, the subtext of like, oh, this means that, and all that the reader can actually see this. And actually, I have a question for you. Like, you've seen maybe not the most recent draft, but like, so I think I sent it to you in December, and I don't know if you got around to actually reading it, but from what you have read of it, what do you think?
I'm definitely with the what was the name? Jeff? You said?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely with Jeff on this. I feel like you've definitely made some serious progress with it. The main thing that the main issue that I always had with it was that it was so easy to take the mother's side. So you were able to kind of like blur those lines a little bit more, so that way you could sympathize with what Nikki is going through. That was a big thing. So I'm glad you were able to figure that out. What I'm definitely intrigued by it. I can't wait to see how this all turns out. So when you have you thought about this, like when it's time to shop it around, have you thought about like doing it as a package, saying that I want to write and direct it, or are you just willing to just sell the screenplay and let that go on its own?
Well, I definitely want to write and direct it. Like I've been living with this thing for I've been living with this script in my mind for like the last 2 years, and on set, sometimes like I get the sides every day just to sort of read like not only what's going on, but how a screenplay is formatted properly and stuff like that. And there are times, and like I have pages here where I sort of did like a very rudimentary like script breakdown of like, okay, who are all the different characters, what are the different locations that are in the script, and then figuring out like how many days it would take to film this, that if this was like super low budget, like less than $1 million or something like that, then we could probably do the whole thing in like 15 days. And
excellent.
I'm aiming for like maybe like a $5 million budget so that we can have like 20 to be generous, because it's a very dialogue heavy script, and like there are a few locations that we can spend like 3 days we could spend a few days at. So, and then just figuring like what like if we can get one location where we can have a bunch of different scenes in there all at once. Like this is where being a part of the locations department gives you an advantage, because then you figure out how you can schedule and budget economically.
Nice. Yeah. So
and then I also have like my dream cast in there, and as a and now, and it's funny, like working on Burden of Truth, now that I've sort of, like season 2 compared to, like season 1, we were still, figuring out like how to work together and what the show is. And we did 10 episodes and like 16 weeks of 70-hour work weeks at minimum. So like it's a great job. It's a great job, and it's what I want to do with my life. But it is exhausting. Like even under the best of circumstances, weekends are primarily for sleep. But but like with season 2, like, and it helps that when we did Breakthrough, that was kind of like training for the 10K marathon, and so with season 3 with that and I'm just starting to like I'm picturing different actors from Burden of Truth for like some of the minor parts, where it's like, oh, Peter would be great for this cousin, and here's a role that Kristen can have a cameo in. And I wrote an extra scene of like the main character dealing with her drunk roommate, and I'm like, can Annand play drunk? And I know like it's some, and like my sort of like casting choices, like for the mother, this is a really outside the box idea, but I'm kind of putting Farrell.
Terry Farrell.
You don't know, she played Jadzia Dax in Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Oh yeah, yep. And
I don't think she's like actually done done like officially like a movie or a TV show since like 2002. Like I know she does like the con circuit, and she's on like the goes to different Star Trek conventions, and she's actually married to Adam Nimoy now. But I'd like to think of this as sort of like the she came out of retirement for us.
Yeah.
For us project.
Yeah, it's definitely a really good meaty role that Terry Farrell can definitely sink her teeth into. I think she is, she's a solid actress. She has a great presence, and with this particular role, I think she can really do something with it. So, and that was actually going to be my next question. That was actually going to be my next question regarding the Dreamcast, because I already knew the answer, but I knew that my listeners hadn't yet been given that information.
Okay. Should we talk about what the actual movie's about?
Yes, actually, let's go ahead and
Okay.
Okay. So tell us just what the Legend of Nikki Olives is all about. What was that storyline that really kind of drove you to get this on paper?
Okay, so when I was in university, I met this woman named Ricky Mushrooms, and we never officially dated, but she was the closest thing that I had to a girlfriend at the time. And when she was 13 years old, she left her family of her own volition and lived on the streets for a year, which to me, as a guy who's from this very tightly knit family, who has a mother who's in constant contact with me about my weight, that to me just sounded incredible. Now, in real life, Ricky, she reconciled with her folks. They made up. She got a degree in education. She's married, and she has a little girl named Louise that's in kindergarten right now. But I always wondered, well, what if that didn't happen? What if she kept running, and what would make her stop? And what if the person who made her stop was from this family from this tightly knit extended family that's run by a matriarch who, and I shit you not, wears an actual gauntlet. And so my project is a lighthearted drama it's a feature film. It's a lighthearted drama in the vein of Parenthood the series or Big Sick. Like when I saw The Big Sick, I was like, oh my God, that is exactly what I'm aiming for. And it's about three people. It's about a woman who has to learn to let love and it's about a self-made woman who has to learn to let love and family into her life. Somewhat passive guy who has to learn to stand up for himself, and it's about a mother whose identity is all she has left, having to learn to let go. Mm-hmm. And there's like I said, there's the extended family and a bunch of a bunch of colorful characters in there, and plot twists and turns along the way. But basically, like those three arcs are kind of like that's basically the whole movie.
Nice.
And like we were talking about, being more sympathetic with the mother. That was probably Becca's, her character arc is probably the most complicated of the three arcs, because I mean, first off, it's based off my actual mother, and if you're wondering, well, why does she wear the gauntlet? It's because, and it's in the movie as well. My mom had breast cancer a few years ago, and she survived. She's cancer-free, but she had to have some of her lymph nodes removed, and so because of that, she has to wear this compression glove and sleeve on her right arm, otherwise her arm just swells up with fluid, and she has to have it pumped out every night. And so I was kind of thinking about that. I was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you wore a gauntlet underneath the sleeve, just to look badass, that sort of thing. And so that was kind of one of my sparks of inspiration for to where the gauntlet, it's not literally the one ring, but it's sort of like the It's the elephant in the room. It's the thing that nobody talks about, yet we all acknowledge, and that is sort of like the symbol of the power and influence she has, over her family and especially her son. And eventually, spoilers for the movie, the final moment of the movie is them is not only them throwing away the gauntlet, but Becca gives the gauntlet to Linus and Nikki, the main characters, telling that she doesn't need it anymore.
That's very cool. I was really taken with this story.
And word of advice: when you're pitching it to people, don't use the Infinity Gauntlet. Part of my hook of to try to get people interested is imagine meeting your boyfriend's mother for the first time, and she's wearing the Infinity Gauntlet. Which, after Avengers Infinity War, everyone would know what you're talking about. But I use that as part of my rehearsal the rehearsal for my pitch. And one of the producers, Kyle Irving, was like, "What's an Infinity Gauntlet?" I have no idea what you're talking about.
So yeah, it's one of those things.
Talking about the movie Nets, I would have no idea who the hell he was talking about. So fair game.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't rely on pop culture references when you're trying to make a point.
Yeah. That's for sure, because you never know who's going to get it and who's not. So, so you've recently been able to give this quite an audience. So tell us about your recent trip to a convention where you were able to get some very, very unbelievable ears hearing this particular story.
Okay, so technically it wasn't really a convention. It's more like a conference thing where at the Fairmont Hotel here in Winnipeg, every year in January, they have this thing called All Access, where it's a bunch of, it's all like these executives and producers and, a bunch of people in like the film and TV industry here in Canada. They all come together and they have, there are all these panels and presentations about different things related to our industry, and it's also a really great opportunity for one-on-one meetings where you arrange like have these little like speed date 15-minute interviews where you pitch and pitch like your project or you pitch your project to, like I said, to different like producers and executives and filmmakers. And I was there. But I was also there just to, the Eagle Vision people, the Eagle Vision, it's the production company behind Burden of Truth. They were there they were kind of like the bells of the ball there because they had on Tuesday, which is the busiest day, they had the first panel there where they were talking about diversity both in front of and behind camera, and how integrating that into their business model has led to like some really great success. And so, I know these guys, and I've gotten to know them fairly well. And I was, like I said, I was there primarily just to pitch, and I went to the producer there, Kyle Irving. I talked to him, and I said, listen, when you guys are like done and you have like a free minute or two, can I rehearse my pitch to you? And he was like, "Oh yeah, sure. Come see me after lunch, and we'll do that." And I thought we were just going to find like a secluded, quiet spot in the foyer and do just sort of like a quick one-on-one with him, because I sort of did that with another guy, Tyson, who's like the creative team behind Burden of Truth. But what happens instead is that Cal comes out, and there's Kristen Crook, who's the lead actress and the number one on call sheet, and her and also one of the executive producers. Her boyfriend, and Eric, who's one of the he's one of the writers on the show. Brad Simpson, the show's creator. Tyson, who is a filmmaker in his own right, and he has he does all like the second unit stuff, and one of the co-producers as well. Duffy, who's our first AD, and then Rebecca Gibbs, Kyle's wife, and who's the technically the showrunner of the show, and it's the creative team behind a hit CBC series, and the leading lady who earlier that day I had given books to, because Kristen's this big bibliophile, and I gave her a copy of his Dark Materials trilogy. Mm-hmm. Of Golden Compass, Subtle Knife, Amber Spyglass, and so I thought it was just going to be Kyle, and it would just be Kyle in a secluded spot in the foyer. Instead, him and the whole like Burden of Truth Eagle Vision people, they come out and they're like, "Oh, hey, Luke, with us." And so I followed them from the foyer to the elevator, up the elevator, into their hotel room, and I rehearsed my pitch to them to seven of the to like the big seven creative behind Burden of Truth. And the whole time I was going up there, I was just thinking, oh God, this is I was thinking, this is what it feels like to be invited to hang out with the cool kids in high school. And then immediately afterwards, oh God, when does the pig's blood come in?
Yeah, the whole I definitely feel
time I'm just like, oh God, when is it going to go horribly wrong and the other shoe is going to drop? And it didn't. And
it's one of those things where just like you almost feel like you almost feel stupid for even thinking of all the downside of that moment, because you're not enjoying what's happening right now in front of you. Like those are those great like out of body experiences that you just want to hold on to for the rest of your life. And
right. And if you had told 16-year-old me that not only I would be working alongside Lana Lang, but that I would be giving books to her and rehearsing a movie pitch to her of a hit CBC series, I wouldn't have believed you. And there's still like a tiny part of me that still can't. Like that's the humbling aspect of it. That's the you need to hold on to that just so that when you like further when you get like further success in your field, that you don't become like an asshole, that you can step back and be like, oh my God, I'm actually doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like, this is what you have been wanting to do all your life, and now here it is, like right in front of you. You are actually moving forward on your journey, and it's the journey that you've always wanted to take. That's a wonderful feeling, and I hope that more of our audience really has that sort of feeling as well. So so that's just amazing. And so we know what you're working on now. We know what's in the near future for you. So where can our listeners find you?
Okay, well, Ramblings of a Guy from Regina 2.0 is on iTunes right now. I'm on Facebook, Luke Annand. I don't really do Twitter anymore because I listened to your recent episode and you described Twitter as a cocktail party. The last 2 years, it's basically become an endless parade of sadness and misery, and I only jump on Twitter on occasion if like the last time I was on there for like any serious amount of time was I live tweeted during the series finale of The Americans.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I still have Twitter. I'm just not on it nearly as much as I was before. Like I said, it became an endless parade of sadness and misery. But lately, I've actually been I've really been focusing on my Instagram account, because I went through and I found like a bunch of old pictures that's been sitting on like an external hard drive, and I went through it, and I'm starting to see my Instagram account as like the story of my life, as opposed to like a bunch of pictures of random crap. So in the last few days, I went and I sort of curated this sort of like the journey of like, my life story of like, this is pictures of my family friends. This is when it was snowing on the farm that I grew up on, and so I took a few pictures of that. This is a few pictures of me when I was filming one of my student short films at the U of R, where I set a bunch of pallets on fire and made like a makeshift crane out of a forklift, a pallet, and a sheet of plywood.
Wow.
And looking back on that now, I'm like, oh my God, I was in so many safety violations.
And and I saw those pictures. They look terrific. So it definitely worked. The effect really, definitely worked. So, so I really hope that you guys all, find them. It's still Regina Roadie, right?
Yeah, it's still Regina Roadie. That's always my.
Yeah, so. I really hope that all you listeners have really, taken to heart what this journey that Luke has been on really is. Now, obviously, this is not the end. This is really just the beginning. But at the same time, he worked so long for, quite a few years to get to this moment. And now all there is just constantly like, getting things ready for what's to come. So I really hope that that all of you guys have really enjoyed listening to Luke Annand's journey. I hope that that you all just keep on listening, as we'll be talking not only with painter Elizabeth Meggs next week, but we'll also be continuing on with our filmmaker miniseries going on to leading up to the Oscars. One last question, though, since this is something I'm going to ask my filmmakers. Name one thing that you're looking forward to seeing at the Oscars this month.
Well, I really hope Regina King wins. Yeah, basically, it's like, I freaking love that movie. I love that movie so much because it's so beautiful. And actually, just to bring it back to Kristen again, she's like this bibliophile, and on her Instagram, here's this that I think is really cool. And she's actually sort of inspired me to like start like reading like novels again. And the book that I want to read is James Baldwin's If Beale Street Could Talk, because I saw this documentary last year called I Am Not Your Negro, which is about James Baldwin, a white kid growing up on a farm in outside Moss Bay, Saskatchewan. I had no idea who James Baldwin was, and then I see this documentary, and it's like, oh my God, this guy's incredible. And so I actually like want to like read one of his books, just to sort of get a sense of like who he is as a writer, because my God, this guy is like one of the most eloquent, articulate, and insightful guys I've ever seen. And so I'm really looking forward to like reading like his actual work.
Yeah.
And Beale Street Could Talk is just, oh my God, it is such a beautiful movie.
Wow, this has been just a great look at your journey. This has been very inspiring, and like I said before, I really hope that that all of my listeners really take that to heart and remember to have patience on your own journey and just keep plugging away, because you're going to get those. You're going to hit those milestones. You're going to get those moments where people are going to be saying, yes, you're on the right track. Keep doing what you're doing. And that's what Luke has gotten in his life. That's what he will continue to get. And I see nothing but a great future ahead for him. So thank you all so much for listening. This has been a blast listening to Luke's journey and continuing to listen to all of the different journeys that we have that we've already covered, and the many more that are ahead of us. So for Luke Annand, this is George Sirois saying to all of you, ever upward. We'll see you next week.